Okay, this lesson is on using the quadratic formula. So for each of your lesson problems, there's 4, and I have a worksheet that you can use to help you fill this in. Your equation that you're using is up here at the top, so keep that in mind. And on your paper, you have a little spot over here to the left where you can label your A, your B, and your C. So please use that. So in this equation, this is a trinomial. In front of the x squared, the coefficient here is 1. That is our A. The coefficient of the x term is our B, and C is our constant. We're going to go ahead and plug those in to this quadratic formula. So the formula says negative B. Well, B is negative 18. So we're going to put negative 18 here. Then B squared, so still have negative 18. 4 times A is 1, and C is 32, divided by 2 times A. Now remember, out to the side on the left, you should have labeled what your A, B, and C would be. Next, a negative 18 is going to be a positive 18, plus or minus the square root. Then you're going to do negative 18 times negative 18, which gives us 324. And then we have a negative 4 times 1 times 32, which is a negative 128. All divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Bring down the 18, plus or minus square root. 324 minus 128 is 196, all divided by 2. Just taking this one step at a time. And then the square root of 196, type that into your calculator. And you should only be using the handheld, no Desmos today. The square root of 196, whoops, I shouldn't still have that square root sign. If I take the square root of 196, the square root sign is gone. It is 14, and then we still have our divide by 2. At this point, I want you to go use the second column to figure out what the two solutions would be here. So we have 18 plus 14 divided by 2, and 18 minus 14 divided by 2. 18 plus 14 would be 32 divided by 2, which would be 16. And 18 minus 14 would be 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So the solutions are x equal to 16 and x equal to 2. Sometimes those are called solutions, sometimes they're called roots, and sometimes they're called zeros of the function. Now, just as a reminder, that is where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So it's going through at 2 and back up at 16, just so that you kind of know what that would look like. Okay, let's try the next one. Take a minute and write down the equation at the top. All right, let's label our A, B, and C. So our A is 3, our B is 7, and our C is 4. So we're going to plug those in. So B is positive 7, so that goes here. Our A is 3, and our C is 4, all divided by 2 times A, which is 3. All right, so we have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared would be 49. And then negative 4 times 3 times 4 would be a negative 48. All right, we know 49 minus 48 is 1, so we have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 1 divided by 6. And then the square root of 1 would just be 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. So we have negative 7 plus or minus 1 divided by 6. Split this up into negative 7 plus 1 divided by 6 and negative 7 minus 1 divided by 6. We get negative 6 divided by 6, which is a negative 1. And negative 8 divided by 6, which, excuse me, which is a repeating decimal, so I prefer you to leave it as You technically could leave it as -8 over 6, or if you reduce it, -4/3, or write it as a mixed number, -1 1/3.
Yes. No, I was making a video, but it's okay.
No, it's fine.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Okay, go ahead and write down the next one, and if you want to pause the video and try it on your own, you certainly can. Okay. So we've got our A, our B, and our C. So let's plug in. Our B is -8, so we're going to plug in a -8, and then -8 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 2, and C, which is 9, all divided by 2 times A. A -8 is a +8, plus or minus the square root. -8 to the second power would be 64. And then when you multiply -4 times 2 times 9, you get -72, all divided by 4. Keep going. 64 minus 72. Inside our radical is a -8 divided by 4. And at this point, you need to stop, because anytime we have a negative in here, that means there will be no real solution. So if you're wondering what that graph looks like, that is a graph where the parabola is just does not cross the x-axis. It would look something like that. All right, last one. Write down the equation, and then we're going to have a little bit of work here, first of all, to make sure that everything is on the same side, because we need to have the quadratic equal to 0. So if we take this -3 and we move it over to the other side, we have to change the sign because we're really adding 3 to each side. So we end up with this equation. And please write them both down. Don't just write this one down, or you won't know where you came from. And then fill out your A, B, and C over on the side. Okay, -B, our B is -13. B squared minus 4 times A is 12. C is 3 divided by 2 times A, which is 12. A -13 is a +13, plus or minus the square root of -13 squared, 169, minus 144, divided by 24. Again, it's okay if you're using a handheld calculator, but not the Desmos today. So we're going to take care of the inside of this radical, 169 minus 144. And I know some of you are noticing that the 169 and the 144 are both perfect squares. Do not square root them until you've subtracted. It's order of operations. We need to take care of the subtraction first. Now you can see that we have square root of 25 in there. Well, the square root of 25 is 5. And then we can go and write two separate expressions, 13 plus 5 divided by 24, and 13 minus 5 divided by 24. Simplify it all the way down, and you will get 3/4 as one of your solutions, and 1/3 as the other. Now I do need to go over one more thing, so if you can find a spot to add this into your notes somewhere, it will be very beneficial. So if we were to end up in the process of our quadratic formula with something that looked like this, we do not know the square root of 20 as a perfect square, but I don't want you to leave it like this. I would like for you to simplify it and break it down. It's been a little while since we did that, but you want to think of that square root of 20 and think of a perfect square that could divide into it, like 4 or 9 or 16 or 25 or 36. And we do know that this can break down into 4 times 5.
Hello? Hey, yes.
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks. Bye-bye. Well, this video's got all kind of excitement on it. All right. So now we know the square root of 4, which is 2. So that can come out as a 2. So here's what we end up with. 6 plus or minus. The 4 comes out as a 2. The 5 is left inside. We still have the divide by 2. The only other thing that I want you to take into consideration is if these exterior numbers, not the number inside, but the exterior numbers, can all simplify. Now, all 3 of them are going to need to simplify to write it this way. Then you should do that. They all divide by 2, so we end up with 3 plus or minus 1 square root of 5 over 1, which technically could just be written as 3 plus or minus the square root of 5, because we don't need the 1 in front or the 1 on the bottom. So those are some notes to keep in mind. Please make sure you take your time on your homework and show all your steps.